Hello, everybody. Welcome. We have well over 500 people attending what I think will be a very special conversation about the Thinking Skills for Work program, which Dr. Susan McGurk and Dr. Kim Muser developed together. They have created a very unusual and interesting career, integrating occupational therapy and psychiatric rehabilitation. That's where their positions are at the Boston University. And they also wrote a fabulous book called The Thinking Skills for Work program. I invited the two of them to present this work as part of a two-part series we're doing on cognition. In December, we'll have Dr. Machuri Keshavan review the research on cognition and give us some insight into the new compound antipsychotic that was developed that showed some hope for cognition in a phase 2 trial. So I want to thank you, Susan McGurk, for all your work, for donating your time today. Susan will be our presenter, and Kim will join for Q&A. So thank you, Susan, and let's go to the next slide. We have a fabulous helpline. If you need to talk to somebody or problem solve, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., Monday to Friday, 1-800-950-NAMI. We have about 180 volunteers with lived experience who are here to help you troubleshoot a fragmented, chaotic, and underfunded system. Next slide, please. There's a nice picture of Dr. Susan McGurk, who is today's lead speaker. As I mentioned, she'll be joined by her colleague who wrote the Thinking Skills for Work program for the Q&A, Dr. Kim Muser. So Dr. McGurk, do you want to take it away in the presentation?
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Duckworth. I really appreciate the invitation to present here and talk about our intervention. Cognitive Remediation and Employment, the Thinking Skills for Work program, and as Dr. Duckworth said, I co-developed this program with my colleague, Dr. Kim Muser. So the outline of what I'm going to present today, we'll start with what is cognition, then move on to what is cognitive remediation, which is an area of great interest for people. I will provide an overview of the Thinking Skills for Work, which is an evidence-based practice for improving cognition and employment for people living with serious mental illnesses. I'll briefly present some of our research findings, some issues with availability and scaling up Thinking Skills for Work, and briefly summarize. I also have some questions for the audience as we go along that Hagen will help me with, and those will pop up as we move along. So what is cognition? Cognition is a set of thinking skills that involve mental activities such as paying attention to one thing at a time. This is a keystone cognitive area that has enormous downstream effects on other cognitive areas, such as memory. Processing speed, which is the ability to think on our feet or answer a question in a job interview. Learning and memory, the ability to learn information and retain it over the short or long term. It includes aspects like prospective memory, which is remembering to do something like take the pizza out of the oven 20 minutes from now. All these aspects are very important for our daily functioning. And of course, executive functions. And this describes a broad range of abilities such as judgment, abstract thinking, planning ahead, and solving problems. So why are these thinking skills important? Well, because cognitive difficulties are common in people who are living with schizophrenia and other serious mental illnesses, because cognitive difficulties impair people's ability in a broad range of functioning, such as independent care, self-care, independent living, and social relationships, and of course, work. Because cognitive difficulties are barriers to recovery in these areas. And most relevant to what I'll present today in terms of some of our research findings, these skills are predictive of response to psychosocial rehabilitation. including social skills training and supported employment, meaning those people who have greater cognitive difficulties show less profits from these evidence-based interventions. So these cognitive areas, or these thinking skills, have enormous importance for people's daily lives. So we definitely know through cross-sectional and prospective studies of our own and our colleagues that greater cognitive difficulties are associated with poor work outcomes, including getting a job and keeping it. How do these problems with thinking skills show up on the job? How might somebody recognize them? Sometimes in slowness and having difficulties completing tasks on time. Sometimes poor quality of work, such as making mistakes or forgetting steps of tasks. Poor problem solving when confronted with an unexpected problem. Lower stamina or fatigue, which, by the way, is something that we all readily recognize in people with traumatic brain injury, but have had difficulties understanding that this occurs in people with serious mental illnesses, because people who have more compromised cognitive functioning have to try harder on cognitive demanding tasks. There can be lateness or absenteeism or disorganization in completing one's work tasks. And we have noticed that people sometimes blame these behaviors on clinical symptoms or a lack of motivation on the person's part, or that they don't want the job, when in fact they're often due to a cognitive issue that can be readily, that the person can be readily helped with. Excuse me. So what is cognitive remediation? Excuse me. The definition of cognitive remediation was established by our international work group called the Cognitive Remediation Therapy Expert Working Group, or CREW. It addresses broad range cognitive skills like attention, memory, executive function, social functioning, metacognition. Metacognition is our ability to think or reflect on our own thinking or our own thinking skills. The interventions involving cognitive remediation uses scientific principles of learning. And most importantly, the ultimate goal of cognitive remediation programs is to improve people's functioning. So what are the core components of cognitive remediation? Well, a group of us published a paper on this area, and this is the result. These core areas are the result of many, many published RCTs in cognitive remediation. And the meat and potatoes.
Susan, can I ask you to remind people what an RCT is?
Thank you, Dr. Duckworth. Yeah, an RCT is a randomized controlled trial. So that is our gold standard of scientific evidence. And there is a substantial number of randomized controlled trials evaluating cognitive remediation, such that we know what are the core ingredients and what are the so-called active ingredients, those that are involved in producing either a cognitive and/or a functional effect. So the basic elements of cognitive remediation program is computer cognitive practice. This typically involves a software program and uses a computer to deliver it. We've also learned through all these multiple published trials that trained facilitation is critical for someone profiting from computer cognitive training, for example. And I'll explain why. If someone buys a software program that has these exercises and does it on their own, sometimes that person winds up practicing a poor strategy for a particular exercise over and over, and doesn't have the input to help them improve their performance. So having someone point out what they may be doing wrong and give them a better approach is really critical. Another aspect that has an important contribution to effects is teaching strategies. For example, during the computer cognitive training. And the less rigorous component or ingredient is efforts to transfer. And I will come back to this momentarily. So there are an increasing number of studies that are available, randomized controlled trials in particular, to evaluate the effects of these set of interventions called cognitive remediation on cognition, which is the target, symptoms, and functioning, the ultimate goal. And so what we have found across these meta-analyses is largely the same findings, and that is from ours that we published in 2007 with 25 randomized controlled trials, that we have a signal, or otherwise known as an effect size of around 0.4, which is a moderate effect size, medium, close to medium, on symptoms, cognition, and functioning. Wykes, which was Wykes et al., published in 2011, found the same impact across cognition, symptoms, and functioning. And VITA has included 130 randomized controlled trials. This was published in 2021, which shows you the level of interest in these interventions. And what I want to say about these findings is that these overall, this group of intervention does improve cognition. It has a lesser effect on symptoms, which is not the target, and has an interesting effect on functioning, and in particular, significant heterogeneity in effect sizes that was not seen for cognition, meaning that how much effect these interventions had on functioning, say social skills, functioning, or work, was all over the map. Some had no effect, some had a large effect, such that one could use a statistical approach to understand what are the moderators of that effect of cognitive remediation on functioning. Remember, I said the ultimate goal of cognitive remediation is to impact functioning. So what we learned, and this we demonstrated in our publication in 2007, is that psychosocial rehabilitation moderates the effects of cognitive remediation on community functioning. So what does that mean? It means that if you deliver cognitive remediation in the context of psychosocial rehabilitation, social skills training, vocational rehabilitation, the impact on functioning is significantly greater than if someone is doing cognitive exercises in a standalone program, meaning in a lab somewhere where it's not integrated with psychosocial rehabilitation that's addressing that person's goal. So you can do cognitive practice, computer cognitive practice till the cows come home. You can improve your cognition, but it does not transfer to functioning. If you want to use these set of strategies, this cognitive remediation approaches, your best use of those is to integrate it with an evidence-based psychosocial rehabilitation to get your biggest impact on functioning. And why is that? The reason that is because these psychosocial rehabilitation programs lean on someone's learning. It requires learning, problem solving, memory to profit from these functional interventions. And so if you are concomitantly sharpening someone's cognitive skills, they're going to get more out of the concomitant intervention that requires those skills. So that is what these meta-analyses have shown across 20 years of research. So now I'll give you it's more than that. It's more like 25 years of research. An overview of thinking skills for work. So the goal of our program is to improve cognitive abilities and to optimize getting and keeping competitive work. They're co-primary goals for our intervention. However, what we learned when we initially were delivering Thinking Skills for Work is that we were working with clients who were enrolled in vocational rehabilitation programs, but who were expressing a profound lack of confidence, a loss of self-esteem, and negative self-thinking around their ability as workers. And we learned from this. And what we learned is that people often had stigmatizing and upsetting events or experiences at work, such as getting laid off when they weren't expecting it, getting fired, or walking off the job because they didn't know how to solve a problem or they were afraid of getting fired. And all of those experiences conspired to cause them to feel less effective and less hopeful as a worker. And so we target those thoughts and feelings as well as part of our intervention, because feeling better about one's chances of getting and keeping a job and feeling better about ourselves as a worker will increase our motivation to engage in, for example, vocational rehabilitation. So we know, I think everyone understands why employment is important. Most people living with serious mental illness want to work. Up to 70% of people espouse an interest in employment. However, competitive work rates in this group of people have remained low despite supported employment, which is an evidence-based vocational rehabilitation practice, between 10 and 25%, representing unemployment or underemployment. And
May I interrupt this great
Yes.
presentation briefly to mention there is an Ask the Expert on supported employment given by Dr. Bob Drake. It is part of our library of dozens and dozens of conversations with leading thinkers and researchers in this area. So a couple of the questions relate to employment, ADA, do I disclose? We took them up with Dr. Bob Drake. That's easily available by Googling NAMI Ask the Expert. Sorry to interrupt you, Dr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Duckworth, because we can't really mention individual placement and support, which is the evidence-based support employment, without mentioning Dr. Drake. He's a good friend and colleague, and Kim and I have valued our collaborations with him through the years and currently. So we know from Dr. Drake and Debbie Becker and Gary Bond that the benefits of work are substantial. It increases someone's financial standing, improves a sense of self, provides opportunities for social contacts, facilitates coping with symptoms, and reducing risk for hospitalization, and it's personally meaningful for everybody. So who have we enrolled in Thinking Skills for Work in our clinical implementations and our studies? Typically, it's people who want to work, who are enrolled in vocational rehabilitation. They're people living with serious mental illnesses, for example, schizophrenia, major depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety disorders, but have not achieved work despite enrollment in vocational rehabilitation, or had achieved the job and lost it. These are people that we look to include because we know that there's a chance that cognitive difficulties contributed to unsuccessful work. So what are the components of Thinking Skills for Work? Well, you will notice that we have had the core ingredients, the core active ingredients of cognitive remediation programs as part of Thinking Skills from Work from the time we developed it in 2000. So computer cognitive practice, the way we use it is highly standardized, manualized. It's very client friendly. We focus on progress, not if someone does something right or wrong, but rather if they are improving. This is facilitated by someone we call the cognitive specialist, who's the point person for Thinking Skills for Work. And this person provides strategy coaching to help people get the most out of this practice, and gives lots of positive reinforcement, encouragement, Computer cognitive training takes effort, and this person helps the client put forth that effort. Our intervention also contains cognitive self-management strategies. So we have two cognitive components: computer cognitive practice and cognitive self-management strategies. And these strategies I will spend a little more time on in a moment. But these involve everyday strategies that all of us use or should use to help optimize our cognition and our functioning. And all of this is integrated with vocational rehabilitation. So the cognitive specialist is responsible for program delivery, can be an employment specialist or a clinician. They participate in employment meetings, so they're a member of the vocational team. And they hold the cognitive expertise of that vocational team. And someone having that is very important. So the components of the intervention involve referral, which is often from vocational services or clinical services, because we've done most of our research in very large mental health agencies that have a vocational department. We enroll them, explain what it is, and see if they're interested. Then we provide an assessment, and this is largely based on a client interview. So we ask the person about their cognitive strengths and weaknesses, what areas they would like to shore up or improve. What are the cognitive self-management strategies they use around work or in their daily life, to see if there's some we can add or build on based on what they're using. We also ask about, for example, their last job, what may have gone right and what may have gone wrong, for us to try to understand the cognitive culprit in any job performance difficulties or job loss. And that will be the focus for this person. Then, of course, we have the computer cognitive training. It involves 24 lesson plans that are, as I said, structured and manualized and are geared to practice the broad range of cognitive functions. And while the person is working on these, the cognitive specialist is providing strategy coaching and integrating their work in the computer cognitive training with their work goals and work tasks that they're likely to encounter based on the kind of job they're looking for or the kind of job they have. Then there are 12 sessions of cognitive self-management strategies. And as I said, these involve a range of cognitive areas that can be put into place immediately by the employment specialist on the job when needed. Job search planning involves putting together the information from the assessment, for example, what cognitive areas the person's concerned about, what may have contributed to past job difficulties, and we get the employment specialist involved to put strategies in place before the job begins so that mistakes aren't made again. And the client feels ready to take on that job. So that involves some pre-planning. And job support consultation is that this cognitive expertise, this cognitive specialist is there, part of the vocational team. And if the client has some difficulties on the job, the employment specialist can call upon that expertise and meet with the client and solve the problem. I wanted to show you an example of a computer cognitive exercise. So the instructions that are given for this task is you start on the left, and what you want to do is exit the right as fast as you can and avoid blind alleys. And I want you to tell me what cognitive skill you think this is practicing. Oops. Do we have a majority yet, Hagen? Ah, that is really interesting. Can everybody see the results? Mostly people thought problem solving. And the second answer in terms of amount of people endorsing it is planning. Okay, so I want to say there's no wrong answer here. And these cognitive areas do not exist in silos, okay? So there's no wrong answer. All of these are important, but this is a task of planning. So the goal is to avoid blind alleys, and that involves looking ahead. So the more the person enters a dead end, the longer it takes. So to speed up your time, you want to look ahead and plan your move. And so what a cognitive specialist can do with this result is print this out, sit with the client and ask them, okay, so where do you think your solution went wrong? And what strategies can we use for you to improve it the next time you encounter this task? And this approach inevitably helps people improve the next time they take it. And the way we do computer cognitive training, people revisit certain exercises so the cognitive specialist can check for progress. Now, let's talk about self-management strategies. These are strategies for improving cognitive functioning in everyday life, including during the job search and on the job. They're low tech. They do not require a computer. They can be delivered in the community, in a coffee shop or on the job. They're taught using psychoeducational, motivational, and cognitive behavioral methods, which are a very effective way of teaching someone a new skill. And they can be taught individually, in a group format, at the agency, or in the community. There are 10 topics, and each topic has a handout, and the handout is for the participant. And the handouts include information about the cognitive area being addressed and worksheets and checklists to individualize the client's experiences and view of that cognitive area for them. So an example of a strategy is a memory spot. And I'm sorry I didn't get a poll on this because I'd love to know how many people use one. And as you know, for those who use one, it's very efficient because you come into your house or your apartment and you put everything that you don't need in your house or your apartment in this spot. So your keys, you don't need your keys in your apartment or your house, your wallet, your work ID, your Metro Pass, your change, and then they're there optimally by the front door when you leave. It obviates the need for you to remember where you put them. So it becomes part of your routine, and it's a very effective way to find your stuff. And if you find yourself running around your house looking for something you need to leave the house, then you're not using a memory spot. So this is, I have a poll here that Hagen has helped me with. So these are real clients who provided this input about their job performance at work. My mind wanders. I'd miss a lot of instructions and would have to ask my boss again for the instructions. What cognitive area is this client having difficulty with? Primarily memory, speed, planning, attention, problem solving. Attention. Awesome. Hagen, I hope you can save these results because I think they're fascinating. Everybody nailed that. The vast majority said it. Absolutely, it's attention. And let me say again, attention is the keystone cognitive area. It's not the area that people most commonly report as having problem with. That's memory. However, when you teach people attentional strategies, issues with memory diminish because attention takes effort. And when we are trained to put effort into it, we remember. We remember that person's name or the instructions. Okay, next example. I meet a new coworker and hear their name, but I can't remember it 2 minutes later. Memory, that's right. Even though I just said it's more likely attention, which I guess I think it is, but absolutely, this is an example of someone who is displaying an issue remembering the person's name. I go to take my medication after my lunch break and realize I didn't bring my medications with me. What cognitive area is this person perhaps having difficulty with? Planning. Oh, wow. Almost everyone said planning. Absolutely. Planning ahead. That's great. The next example, the person got to work. The door was locked when I got to work, so I went home. What might this solution reflect a problem in? Problem solving, almost 100%. Fabulous. That's exactly right. And then the last one. By the time I figured out what boxes go on the truck is gone. What issue is this person having? Processing speed, exactly. Information processing speed. And that can influence our ability to complete tasks on time. So what are the range of cognitive self-management strategies in our intervention? There are 10 of them. The first 3 focus on enhancing motivation, and they include teaching people the relationship of cognitive skills and work. And this is very psychoeducational, but also individualized because the person is asked about their experience at work, what tasks that they have difficulties with, and the facilitator helps them identify what cognitive issues may have contributed to those work task problems. Recognizing your strengths, this is incredibly uplifting for people. So it's a handout that helps people identify skills and abilities, personal qualities, and resources that they have going for them. And oftentimes, with the help of the facilitator, they identify a whole bunch of these aspects of themselves that they didn't recognize as personal strengths. And there are homework for all of these handouts. All these sessions have homework. And so that person can take the list that they filled out in the session home to their family or their loved ones or their vocational specialist and ask them, look, I identified all these personal skills and personal strengths. What do you think? And did I forget any? And this is really especially helpful if someone's going into a job interview. That's where you really want to know your personal strengths so you can sell yourself to that job interviewer. And then, of course, and I mentioned this, challenging negative self-thinking. So this is a mini CBT handout that teaches people the relationship between thoughts, feelings, and behavior. If I feel ashamed of myself as a worker, I might think I'll never get a job or no one will ever hire me. And then I may try less hard. So people are taught this triad and then given skills to identify maladaptive patterns of thinking, all or nothing, or filtering out the good and focusing on the bad. And they're given skills to recognize those and challenge that way of thinking and change it. And this is a really popular topic. We're doing a study, we're doing several studies evaluating employment specialists, teaching employment specialists to deliver these self-management strategies to clients, and employment specialists love this topic. The other 7 focus on adaptive cognition. So focusing on strategies to improve attention and concentration, reducing memory difficulties, getting organized at home and for the job search, planning ahead, solving problems, and improving thinking speed. And all of the handouts have, as I said, psychoeducational information to understand what these cognitive areas are, but also provides many strategies, more than any one person could use. And so the facilitator can help narrow down 1 or 2 strategies from each area for the client to practice as homework. And to also involve the employment specialist in putting in place in the job. So examples for attention is paraphrasing, reducing distractors, say cleaning up your desk, turning off your phone, using alarms to prompt you to do something or stop doing something, organizing your workspace. For memory, repeating back instructions, and that is very useful because that can help the person determine that they heard it correctly and that they remember it. Using memory spots, using memory aids, alarms, for example, planning ahead. This involves using a scheduler, having a personal or work routine, prioritizing tasks on the job with to-do lists or checklists, problem solving. This involves developing standard solutions to common problems. So for example, the cognitive specialist can work with the employment specialist and client to figure out what are the most likely problems this person is going to encounter on the job. And let's put solutions in place so that they have a way to solve them and not get flustered by them or solve them inappropriately. Identify a problem solver at work, and this is an enormous issue for some clients who might be afraid of their supervisor or their boss. They know they have a question or a problem, but they're afraid. And so the employment specialist can help the client identify someone at work they're comfortable with that they can go to. Sometimes it's a coworker or a friendlier supervisor. And thinking speed. Thinking speed involves practice, and I can prove it to you. If you can remember way back when you learned how to drive a car, I don't know if maybe some of you are currently learning. If you're currently learning, you may notice that it's taking you forever to get the car in gear. Or if you think back, you may remember how long it took you to do the basic steps like putting the key in the charger and turning on the car and backing it out, because every step involved thinking. But with routinizing it, practicing it, it obviates the need for thinking. And so practicing a task can diminish the amount of time it takes to do it because it obviates the need for thinking. Having a routine, which is an overlapping with practice, increasing the efficiency of tasks, and teamwork. Teamwork can really help a person stay with the action. Here's another question for you. Jerome had a job in a grocery store that involved marking items with a price marker. He reported that he would put down the price marker and then wouldn't remember where and would wind up walking up and down the aisles looking for it. His supervisor had been annoyed with Jerome and cautioned him that he was not getting his job task done. How would you help Jerome solve this problem? Here are your choices. Tell Jerome to pay attention. Help Jerome use a memory spot for his price marker when he isn't using it. Teach Jerome to organize his workspace. Suggest that Jerome ask his coworkers to keep track of his price marker. What do you think? Oh man, you nailed it. Absolutely. And this problem actually happened And that was the solution. In fact, the cognitive specialists work with the employment specialists, and they got the boss to give Jerome a special belt where he could hook the price marker on his belt when he wasn't using it. So that was like a perfect memory spot, and it solved the problem. So thank you. And by the way, telling someone to pay attention doesn't help. And I know you're all probably smiling at that. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so just a brief view of the Recognizing Your Strengths handout. It's to increase self-efficacy and hope for work goals. The highlights are discussing how awareness of someone's strengths can make one feel good about oneself and use those practically. These are very practical strategies in job applications and job interviews. And strengths include a range of aspects of ourselves and our lives. Having personal qualities like being friendly or being on time, skills and talents like computer skills, being bilingual, playing a musical instrument, and resources like having an employment specialist. A supportive family is an enormous resource, or a certain educational degree or certificate. So that's what's involved in that handout. Getting organized at home and for the job search. The purpose is to develop personal habits and routines for improving the organization of one's life at home and for the job search. So routine is a highly established way of accomplishing daily tasks and keeping tracks of important stuff. The handout has worksheets to pinpoint the need for specific routines and to make plans to implement new routines, such as a morning routine. It'll help the cognitive specialist and the client identify a lack of morning routine. And so that would need to be put in place. And having a job routine can maximize clients' chances of getting a job. So for example, to use that memory spot, to put your resume there, so when you're leaving the house, you don't forget to take your resume if you're on a job hunt or going to a job interview. These self-management strategies, and in fact, our whole intervention is described in our book, Cognitive Remediation for Successful Employment and Psychiatric Recovery. It includes the research that provided a rationale for the need for the Thinking Skills for Work program. It involves numerous case examples and checklists and worksheets and handouts, the cognitive self-management strategy handouts. We developed an online training course as part of our Scaling Up grant that Marianne Farkas was the primary investigator. I was co-investigator on this Scaling Up project, which involved developing tools for delivering remote training to help increase the workforce, the cognitive specialist workforce to deliver thinking skills for work. And we also, as part of that Scaling Up project, developed a field-tested training model. So the online training course involves knowledge transfer as well as competency training. I'll briefly just show you our most important research findings for the Thinking Skills for Work. We have 7 published RCTs and 2 international publications that support the efficacy of Thinking Skills for Work on cognition and work outcomes. The people who have been involved in our studies are living with schizophrenia, but also other serious mental illnesses. This has been tested in very broad groups of people, racially and ethnically diverse, but also we are very proud of the fact that we have had very few exclusionary criteria for people to join our studies, meaning people, substance misuse is not a barrier, comorbid intellectual disability was not a barrier for us, and some of our studies we also included people who had traumatic brain injury. So our studies represent people who represent the broad range of clients receiving vocational services at outpatient mental health agencies. All of our studies have tested Thinking Skills for Work plus vocational rehab compared to vocational rehab alone. All of our studies show a high rate of participation, meaning a high rate of client engagement, and well over 70%. Our follow-up periods are up to 3 years, and all of our studies have shown significantly greater gains in cognition and work for people who receive thinking skills for work combined with vocational rehab compared with vocational rehabilitation alone. I'm going to show you the studies where our vocational rehabilitation program involved IPS, which is the evidence-based vocational model. But first, I want you to know that at the end of all of our studies, we have an independent person, someone independent from the treatment team, provide a semi-structured interview to ask participants how they felt about the intervention, thinking skills to work, and their satisfaction with it, and any sense of benefit. And we were able to organize people's responses according to the CHIME recovery framework. And the C for CHIME is community. And an example of a response for this is by doing the program, I learned I can accomplish a lot in life, like living a normal life in the community. The H is for hope. The H in CHIME is for hope. And under hope, statements such as, I only have a GED, I didn't feel marketable, and I felt that the sessions were helping me to find my true hidden skills and my calling on a future job. I am more motivated and less frightened to look for a job because there was confident knowing I had not lost my thinking skills. And that was a very common endorsement of the program, that people felt like they had not lost their thinking skills as a result of the illness or treatment of the illness or medications or any substance misuse issues that the person has had, where they felt they might have damaged their ability to have or use their thinking skills. And it gave them hope that that had not happened and that they have significant thinking skills to bring to the job. The I in CHIME is for identity. I learned that my thinking skills are sharp and sufficient. I've learned that I'm talented in ways I didn't think I was. I find my passion. This program helped me find something I'm capable of and enjoy. The M in CHIME is meaning. I learned that having a mental illness does not mean that my world is ended. And I just found that very compelling. And the E is empowerment. It showed me how to keep focus and know my surroundings, have a good memory is something I treasure. I think big now. I have confidence in my thoughts. I make sure that I do exactly what I'm supposed to do by asking the manager questions in case I'm not fully understanding my task. Excuse me. So there you have an example of someone using a problem-solving strategy that they were taught and worked for them. One of the studies that we did was to focus on people who were not responding to IPS. Now, individual placement and support is developed by Bob Drake and Debbie Becker and colleagues, and it is the evidence-based practice for vocational rehab. So we're looking at a group of people who are not responding to this evidence-based practice that has an effect size of over 0.7, which is very large. We know there are a group of people, a small group, who do not benefit. So we sought to enroll them in order to enhance their ability to respond to IPS and get the job that they're looking for and keep it. So we asked, is the Thinking Skills Work program effective at improving work outcomes in non-responders? We did a randomized controlled trial on 2 high-fidelity IPS programs. We enrolled people who had not benefited, meaning they hadn't worked for 3 or more months or lost a job, despite receipt of these beautiful services. What we found, and this is published in 2015, is that both cognition was significantly improved in the group who got thinking skills for work combined with IPS, as compared to people who continue to receive IPS. And so what you're looking at is baseline unemployment was unemployment and enrolled in IPS with those non-responsive criteria for enrollment. So no one was working at baseline, right? And so we're looking at employment at 6 months and 6 to 12, 12 to 18, and 18 to 24. And this is not continual enrollment. These are the number of people enrolled at each of these timeframes. So that means that more and more people became enrolled during the 24-month follow-up, and significantly more than people who continue to receive supported employment only. And I want to say, and I said this before, this is, in my opinion, a primo example of how to use cognitive remediation services to incorporate them into an evidence-based practice, for example, IPS, and include people who are not benefiting from that, but who want to, and provide them cognitive services to help them overcome cognitive barriers that are preventing them from profiting from this intervention. So our next study involving IPS was a dismantling study that was funded by the NIMH. So was the prior study. And our question was, is computer cognitive training critical? Or is teaching self-management alone enough? And the reason why we asked this is because computer cognitive training is resource intensive. It requires software, a computer, and for a person to sit at a desk and do that, invest their time in that, as opposed to being in the community with a vocational specialist, where, for example, is one place where self-management strategies can be delivered. And so what we did is we compared the full thinking skills for work, which is the computer cognitive practice plus self-management strategies, compared to self-management strategies only. So for that group, we took out the computer cognitive training. And again, we enrolled people who were unemployed but interested in working and enrolled in IPS. The thinking skills work and the cognitive self-management strategies were delivered by the cognitive specialists and integrated in IPS as usual with thinking skills for work. And we measure cognition symptoms, quality of life through 24 months and track competitive employment over a 2-year period. And what we found surprised us, because we hypothesized that the full thinking skills for work would be superior. And in fact, self-management strategies alone, which are shown in the red, were equally effective at improving work. And what I'm showing you here is weeks of competitive work across the two groups and percent competitively employed of the two groups across 24 months. And there were no significant difference in these outcomes or any other that we assessed. These were self-management strategies pulled their weight and produced as significant effects as the whole program. So what I just want to show you is we compared the 2015 study with the dismantling study. And so the black bar is really the most important. That's our control group. So that was the group in the 2015 study that got high fidelity IPS services. And the TSW 2015 got the full thinking skills for work, as did the light green, the blue-green bar, and TSW dismantling. So TSW 2015, TSW dismantling got the same thing. They got the full thinking skills for work. And you can say the effect, you can see the effects on weeks worked, wages earned, and percentage worked were the same. What I also want you to note is that cognitive self-management alone was as significant as thinking skills for work in the dismantling and in the 2015 study, meaning the addition of the computer cognitive training was not superior, and that cognitive self-management can produce as effective an outcome on work and cognition as the full board thinking skills for work. And all three of these groups did better than the control group that got IPS alone. So they were full thinking skills work, cognitive self-management only groups were both effective at improving work and more effective than IPS alone. And the addition of the computer cognitive training did not improve cognition or work more than just teaching cognitive self-management. And work outcomes were improved in people enrolled in IPS by systematically teaching cognitive self-management strategies. I'm going to end in a few minutes because I really would like to hear some of your questions. So in terms of implementing thinking skills for work, we are focusing on cognitive self-management strategies. And we're focusing on that in a number of ongoing randomized controlled trials, evaluating, for example, employment specialists, learning how to deliver these and delivering them in the context of IPS. And as I mentioned, we have standardized training methods and fidelity criteria and remote training and knowledge and competency training that we used, developed in our scaling up project that we use to train people in these projects. Some of the implementation considerations is that our evidence is strongest for, so these are questions for research. Do we want an employment specialist to deliver self-management strategies? Well, they're certainly in the best position to deliver them. But our experience has shown that having someone separate, usually a master's level cognitive specialist who can work with a vocational team, may be the most efficient and effective way to provide training of these strategies to clients enrolled in vocational rehabilitation. And one argument is that cognitive specialists and employment specialists are putting together their separate view of the clients, and two heads are better than one. But it's an open question of what is the best way to deliver these self-management strategies to people enrolled in vocational rehab. And again, we're addressing this in ongoing studies. By the way, teaching cognitive self-management strategies can be billed as a CBT code by a master's level person. For most employment programs, employment specialists work at the bachelor's level and could not bill using a CBT code. In addition, there is tension between maintaining fidelity to IPS and delivering this adjunctive cognitive program. Although I want you to know that Bob Drake has been incredibly supportive of this work and endorses its inclusion to help people profit more from IPS and people who may have cognitive difficulties that are preventing them from profiting.
Dr. McGurk, can you develop that point a little bit? A CPT code is the way you bill insurance companies. So does that mean all Medicaids will pay for this? All private insurance will pay for this, or is it state by state?
I'm going to ask Kim to weigh in on this question because it's an excellent one, and it's one we're still finding out about. It depends on how brave people are at agencies for billing, but anyone who has tried to bill it as a CBT code has had success.
So CPT is billing, CBT is cognitive behavior therapy, just for
Correct.
our 700 listeners. All right, thank you.
Yes, yes. And yeah, this is an important issue for the field and in scaling up cognitive remediation interventions. And we can come back to this, Dr. Duckworth. Thank you for mentioning that. And CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. There are other ways to bill this too. There's a cognitive specialist and the employment specialist. So as I said, these are questions for research in terms of how is this best delivered? And it could be by both. So in summary, we know that cognitive skills are important for employment. And we know that teaching cognitive self-management strategies in the Thinking Skills for Work program can be integrated with IPS employment services, and that they improve cognition and work outcomes in people receiving IPS. We know that in our studies, we have had high levels of participant engagement and high levels of satisfaction with the program. And a comprehensive curriculum of cognitive self-management strategies that have participant handouts and guideline for teaching is included in our program and in our book. Thank you so much for your attention.
Great. Let's start with the most common question. How do I get this where I live? Philadelphia, New York, California, Flagstaff, Arizona. You know, with 700 people, there's a lot of different locations. Is there a website, a location? Do you deal with your local vocational agency? Let's just start with that because that seems to be the most common question. I think people accept this is cool. It's survived randomized controlled trials, which is real science. It's helpful, but how do I get it?
And that's a problem because scaling this up has certain barriers and funding has been one of them. But I will say that I can provide a list of certified providers of thinking skills for work. We have a national base. And I can give that to you, Dr. Duckworth, to post.
So we'll post that when the recording goes up in a week. We'll have Hagen post that. How many people, how many states are we talking about who are trained in this program? Ballpark.
7, 8,
States.
yes.
So most states do not have this. So this is an opportunity for advocacy. Nothing gets done in American mental health without NAMI. And so now that you know this, this is something you can advocate for. And where would this be paid for? The Department of Mental Health, the Department of Vocational Services within a state system. So people know where to direct their advocacy.
Well, that's a good question. So I think where we have had success is the Department of Mental Health. But you know what, I can find out more information about that. I also want to thank you for suggesting advocacy because I think that's going to be very important for getting this on, for getting this on the map.
So we welcome Dr. Kim Muser to the discussion. Here, Kim, do you have anything else to add to the need for advocacy? So if this is available in 7 or 8 states, what are those states? So that people in those states who are on this webinar can get going, and the rest of the other 43 or so will have to do some work.
Right.
And-
I'll leave
Yeah.
it to Susan to list the states, but just to talk about the primary people with whom to advocate, mental health agencies would be the #1 place to advocate, and the funding of these services could be within the context of providing supported employment. In our current project, we're having employment specialists teach the cognitive self-management strategies in the context of also helping their clients look for and find competitive jobs. The other way of doing it would be to have a master's level clinician provide the cognitive self-management strategies, because the teaching of cognitive self-management strategies is a kind of a cognitive behavioral type of service, because you're using basic skills, things like modeling, role playing, home assignments, and the like to practice. And so the cognitive self-management skills can be taught by a master's level clinician, and then those could be billed as a CBT code.
And that can be done anywhere.
Well, it's anywhere that you can bill for cognitive behavior therapy. Certainly, the teaching of cognitive self-management strategies is more or less fits along the same lines as teaching, say, coping strategies for dealing with psychotic symptoms or depression, and the teaching of interpersonal skills, as in social skills training, and so on. It's a different domain of skills that are being taught, but it is one that is integrally related to a serious mental illness in the same way that symptoms and impairments in social functioning are.
Dr. McGurk, you happen to have the states where this is up and running?
And by up and running, it's at selected agencies. So I will give you that information afterward. New York, Massachusetts, Oregon, Tennessee, California, New Hampshire, Kansas.
Yeah, that's a helpful start because we'll have people in all those places on this webinar who will listen to it. The other states need to get to work in terms of advocacy with Department of Mental Health, because this does have good research and it is addressing something very important, which is kind of the vocational aspect of recovery. A couple other questions I wanted to go through. How can employers best support someone who lives with a cognitive vulnerability? Love that question. So positive. What have you learned from your travels?
Hey, before Susan tries to answer this one, Ken, I typed a fairly long answer to that one.
Oh, okay, great. Can you give a short answer to the group?
Yeah, well, what I said was something along the lines of, yes, there's many things that an employer could do, and it depends on the nature of the challenges and the needs. Some employers have difficulty shifting tasks, and so trying to organize work activities so that there's less shifting of tasks. Some clients benefit from having like a regular to-do list, organizing their the things that they need to do on the job for a particular day. Some clients with multiple tasks benefit from developing a kind of a checklist that has the amount of time you're supposed to spend on each task, and then when you're supposed to move on to the next one, and they can use that to guide them in going through the tasks. Some people benefit from having steps of particular skills posted. Many people benefit from having a designated like problem solver to go to if there's a difficulty on the job. If there are difficulties keeping up, doing things fast enough, both trying to help people do it more efficiently if such ways exist, or trying to kind of relax certain productivity requirements. People do tend to get faster over time, but sometimes that's that can be a challenge. So there's many, many different things. I'd say the most important thing would be to open up a dialogue, be open to kind of creative problem solving around it, and to recognize that there's a lot of tools at their disposal should they like.
I would add one more thing to that, and it's something I thought of earlier, and that is having regular rest breaks, because when you get tired, you make mistakes. And so if it was possible at all, instead of one 50-minute break after 3 hours, even a 5-minute break each hour. If the employer could be, for example, for someone who's needing that.
Great, thank you. So you mentioned kind of how this program works for real people. There was a question about ADHD, depression, co-occurring problems, which are, of course, the rule, not the exception in this space. So could you just develop this idea? You've studied it for what conditions, and sounds like you've allowed people with multiple complexities, which isn't the most common way research is usually done. For bipolar disorder, they typically eliminate people with an addiction problem, with ADHD, with a co-occurring trauma. And so the study is very narrow. It sounds like you've designed your studies to be broad. Is that
Can
accurate?
I just jump in on this one, Susan, and say, we have always believed that the most important research to do is research that is generalizable, meaning that it can be applied to the broad range of people with mental health challenges. And so aside from having a mental health challenge, we have not ruled out people who have also had substance use problems, people with trauma histories and post-traumatic stress disorder. We have also not ruled out people with intellectual disability and a mental illness. People need to have basic reading skills and things like that. And we have found that the broad range of different people with different disorders and challenges can benefit. Interestingly, in most of our studies, we have not ruled out people who do not have cognitive impairment. And so what that means is that a person could have difficulties getting or keeping jobs. Their cognitive functioning could be in the normal range, but everything we know about cognitive functioning means that if we can enhance their cognitive functioning further and increase their motivation for work and challenge negative thinking, that we can help people with even normal levels of cognitive functioning get jobs by trying to boost their cognitive abilities.
Thank you. Excellent. Another question kind of relates to the idea of how this relates to a supported employment. And I want to mention to people ask questions about other things that we've had other webinars, anosognosia. We had Dr. Javier Amador, who's done the most research on that. This question relates to supported employment. We did a webinar with Dr. Bob Drake. How in the Venn diagram of supported employment and cognitive remediation, how much purple is there? Can you do one without the other? Do they build on each other?
I'm gonna jump in on this if that's okay, Susan. Save your voice. I would say that there is an overlap in terms of like the full program or the full cognitive self-management strategies part of the program of around between 30 and 50%. And that is the primary role of enhancing somebody's cognitive abilities is to increase their chances of getting a job and keeping a job. And if you look at the effectiveness of support trials, in these programs, about 50 to 70% of the people get a job at some point. And of the people who get a job, around a half, sometimes 2/3, sometimes less, are able to like either keep it or move on to another job. They become steady workers. And so what that means is that in any supported employment program, between 30 and 50% of people just don't get jobs or get them and lose them really quickly. And that's the primary focus of thinking skills for work, is for those people who are not benefiting as much. And in fact, that's one of the studies that Susan showed to everybody. It was the non-responder study. We showed that thinking skills for work got more people into jobs. But a very interesting thing is that those people kept their jobs much longer. They were much less likely to walk off the job, which is the most common job ending, and they were less likely to get fired. There's also a role, even for people who get jobs and are doing well. We know that more attention needs to be paid on facilitating promotion, careers, and things like that. And so even when people are on a job, the use of these skills taught by employment specialists and so on, kind of selectively, could be just 1 or 2 or 3 here or there, can really be helpful in improving the job support and helping people stay on jobs and move ahead to progress in their jobs.
Thank you, Dr. Muser. Dr. McGurk, last question. How do I participate in more of these studies? Are you doing more studies? You know, I want to be part of this movement to improve cognition and helping people gain and keep employment.
Well, we currently have one in Chicago. What other?
Okay, do you have to live in Chicago to do it? Because we have people from Chicago on this webinar. Or is it
You know,
virtual?
if they-
Like, how's it work?
If you could have them send me an email, then I can consider what projects might be available.
Great. Can you
Yeah.
list your email in the chat and we'll get
Please. Yeah.
Hagen will do that. All right. Well, I want to thank you both for this fabulous webinar on a very
And I'm
important topic.
sorry, can I just say one more thing?
Yes.
I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you suggesting the advocacy. And I just want to shout out to NAMI Metro West because of Larry DeAngelo's leadership. He got small grant funding and connected with me, and that Programs for People, Inc. will be providing this. And it was because of his relentless efforts in getting people to listen and getting small donations and small grants. And I just think that grassroots is so important. So I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just
Larry's a champ here in Massachusetts, friend of the family. And, you know, he represents exactly what we need. It's very unfortunate that there's not a national federal funding stream for this, that we have to do hand-to-hand advocacy each place across the state. Shout out to Larry for all your great work. Thank you both for this fabulous conversation. Everybody who joined will get a certificate of participation. This webinar will be up. We're doing part 2 on cognition, and we have Dr. Machuri Keshavan. He's a professor at the Harvard Medical School, and he isn't work-focused per se. He's more interested in what is everything we know about cognitive enhancement. On Thursday, January 23rd, we have Dr. Jonathan Meyer helping people contend with weight gain as a side effect of antipsychotic medication. Our tools are imperfect, and these medicines all have side effects. So Dr. Jonathan Mayer will be helping us with that. In February, we have Dr. Maurizio Fava, the king of treatment-resistant depression for planet Earth. He'll be joining us. So I encourage all of you to join this free webinar. Next slide, please. We have a couple of books. Dr. McGurk and Muser talked about the Thinking Skills for Work program in our first book, You Are Not Alone. You Are Not Alone for Parents and Caregivers was just written by Dr. Christine Crawford, our Associate Medical Director. Both of these books are NAMI copyright, and both of them donated all the royalties to NAMI. You Are Not Alone, the original book, was a USA Today bestseller, sold over 55,000 hardcover. It's coming out in paperback in February. So the books are moving, and we're proud of them. They're real people sharing what they learned, which, believe it or not, is still a radical idea. Next slide, please. We have sponsors. The sponsors have no impact on our content, but we do accept sponsorship so that we can put up free webinars for people. Bristol Myers Squibb, Delta, Johnson & Johnson, Lundbeck, Otsuka, and Teva are the sponsors for this particular thing. Again, we invite whoever we think are the best researchers, speakers, thinkers, and advocates in the country, but we do need some help to run these things. Next slide, please. You are not alone. This is not medical advice. And if you'd like to support this program to stay free, feel free. We have a donation button on our website, and we're grateful for your attendance. Next slide, please. I want to thank you for joining. You can contact me. My name is Ken. I work at NAMI. There's only one person named Ken at NAMI. HR and I have an understanding. No one can be hired named Ken at NAMI. And so I'm Ken at NAMI.org. It's like a vanity license plate. If you have questions about our webinar or you have suggestions for things we should do, ask the expert at NAMI.org. And Hagen very capably runs that. And Dr. McGurk, yours was there as well. Can we just go back to that? Back one slide, if that's possible. Yes, McGurk at bu.edu. That's really just as good as Ken at NAMI.org. There's only one McGurk at BU. So she has made herself available to you. We love it when the speakers do that, because really, Dr. McGurk and Dr. Muser are international experts on this important topic. So I want to thank you for your generosity in making this presentation. Thank you for being available. Thank you, Dr. Muser, for adding your color commentary to this terrific presentation. And I hope everybody has a wonderful day and a happy Thanksgiving. We'll see you again in December for the second discussion around cognitive remediation. Thanks, everybody.